fortress, a large strong building or group of buildings that can be defended from attack, and typically looks like this, or this, or this, or this. But for just over 30 years, it looked like this. But every now and then, even the strongest fortresses can be breached.
Great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million.
In 2019, India defied the odds and won their first ever border-gavaskar trophy in Australia, winning the 4-test series 2-1. However, some, such as legendary Pakistan bowler Waqar Younis, gave it an asterisk, as Australia were without key personnel such as Steve Smith and Dave Warner following the ball tampering scandal in 2018. So there was still all to play for when India returned to Australia for the 2020-21 summer. The first test did not go to plan for India, with many writing the series off after Australia bowled them out for 36 in the second innings and won comfortably by 8 wickets.
And to knock them over for 36, that's a freakish performance.
Led by stand-in captain Ajinkya Rahane, India turned the tables in the second test, winning by 8 wickets themselves.
Oh, gets him! Ashwin! The skipper gets it away, fittingly hits the winning run.
The third test showed India's resilience, batting out day 5 to secure a draw, meaning that the series was to be decided at the final test at the Gabba fortress. But despite it being 1-1, the odds were heavily stacked against India, and here's why. The Gabba fortress. Australia's last loss at the Gabba came in 1988 against the West Indies, meaning a 32-year unbeaten streak, hence the nicknames the Gabba Fortress or the Gabbatoire, with a reputation for being home to some of Australia's most brutal fast bowling. Mitchell Johnson in the 2013-14 Ashes a prime example. Australia knew they were good there, so had an arrogance about playing there.
Get ready for a broken fucking action.
I can't wait to get you to the Gabba, Ash. Tell you what.
Can't wait to get you to the Gabba. Why wouldn't Payne say that when Australia don't lose there? Australia's confidence at that venue was like no other team at no other venue.
You wait till you get to the Gabba, pal.
No Virat Kohli. The Indian skipper and wife Anushka Sharma were expecting the birth of their first child, meaning he had to fly home after the first test in Adelaide.
I'd be flying back after the first test, and that was purely based on the fact that we have a quarantine period both ways, and beautiful moment in our lives and something that I truly want to experience.
Meaning they would be without a batsman that averaged over 53 at that point in his career, with 27 centuries and 23 half centuries, as well as an average of 54 on Australian soil, second only to his average in India, and someone that had time and time again found a way against the Aussies. Lots of quarantine.
Well, look, if the Indians don't want to play by the rules, don't come.
Through 2020 and 2021, there were many restrictions imposed on sport and travel due to COVID, but thankfully, India was allowed to tour Australia at the end of 2020.
We will need to get exemptions.
Exemptions obtained. India landed in Australia on November the 12th, starting with a 2-week quarantine before the first ODI on November 27.
There's regular testing and that we appropriately quarantine them when they come in.
And while Australia did not have to do this quarantine, both teams were placed in a bio bubble throughout the tour.
The players have got the absolute best training facilities.
However, these bio bubbles were not made equal. The Australians were with their families in the comfort of their own country, less confined with easier training, while the Indians were away from home, away from their families, more confined with more restricted training protocols. And aside from an incident in Melbourne that was investigated where 5 Indian players ate at a restaurant, the Indian players followed the protocols, with players such as Rohit Sharma speaking of the mental health toll of prolonged quarantines. The BCCI advocated for their players throughout, wanting to reduce the restrictions imposed on their players. The Gabba test almost didn't go ahead after an outbreak in New South Wales meant that Queensland closed its borders, resulting in further quarantine for the players. The BCCI were unhappy, however Queensland Shadow Health Minister Ros Bates had this to say. Ultimately, the boards came to an agreement with the Queensland government, meaning that for some Indian players it would be up to 150 days of quarantine since the start of the 2020 IPL. Injuries to key players. With Kohli already leaving, India was decimated by injuries during the tour, meaning they actually had to list a separate squad for the third and fourth test compared with the first two. With 8 first 11 players including Kohli missing for the Gabba test, the first of which was pace bowler Mohammad Shami, his arm fractured by a Pat Cummins bouncer in Adelaide.
Oh, that's not, this is bowling out as well for their key bowlers.
Mohammad Shami, the trainer.
Next was Umesh Yadav, straining his calf during the Melbourne test. Then came KL Rahul, spraining his wrist at training before the third test. 5 injuries came in the third test at Sydney. Jadeja dislocating his thumb on a Stark short ball.
The other concern will be.
And providing us this entertaining moment of friendship. Bumrah also strained his abdomen in the field. Vihari tore his hamstring but batted out the game. And Ashwin hurt his back but also batted out the game. And finally, Rishabh Pant injuring his elbow from a Pat Cummins short ball, but he did play in the Gabba test. Inexperienced players. While Australia boasted an experienced lineup, India was fielding 6 players who were in their 3rd or less games, with Mohammad Siraj, who had just made his debut earlier in the tour, the new leader of the pace attack.
Heavyweight boxer taking the ring against a featherweight.
Looking at the squad for the first 2 tests, we can see that Washington, Natarajan and Thakur were not even listed. And compared to Australia's 1,000, their thrown together bowling attack had only taken 13 wickets.
Of those 13, 2 were Rohit Sharma.
Plus, this inexperienced attack had not played in tests at the Fortress before. Playing at the Gabba Fortress, enduring lots of quarantine, inexperienced players after injuries to key players and Kohli leaving, the odds were certainly against them.
India came into this series under strength and therefore seen as the underdogs.
But they'd shown their resilience.
India were humiliated for 36 in Adelaide.
Adversity builds strength.
So could they possibly do it?
So 1-1 in the series. It's been high drama all the way through and we're all set for the decider.
Haven't lost a game at the Gabba since 1988. That is extraordinary.
Australia were ready and wanted to finish off the series strong. In Nathan Lyon's 100th test, Marnus made 100. Debutant Natarajan took 3, as did Thakur, and as did Washington, with Australia posting 369 in the first innings. Then Thakur and Washington did it with the bat, making a 123-run partnership, as India posted 336 in response. In the second innings, Steve Smith led Australia with 55, while the leader of the pace attack, Siraj, took a 5-fer, and Thakur chimed in with another 4, Australia posting 294 and leaving India with 328 to win.
Their backs were completely against the wall.
Believe in themselves.
They had a belief.
Shubman Gill made 90, while Pujara defiantly copped knock after knock.
He's taking blows all over, but he's not flinching.
It was the most valiant.
When you're playing for India, it doesn't matter, you hang in there.
And despite a valiant effort from Pat Cummins, a defiant Rishabh Pant, with help from Washington Sundar, brought it home.
It's full, it's down the ground. He's quiet. Saini. As far as the fence. India, incredible.
So India breached the fortress, to the surprise of most.
The Anglosphere of Australian cricketing dominance is over.
They can't use the word Gabba anymore.
One of the greatest victories India have ever had.
One of the greatest ever victories.
And much to the delight of the Indian media.
It is by far the greatest day in Indian cricket history.
This will be one of the finest wins that I have seen.
Demonstrating their depth, their fight and their resilience.
Takua came in and debuted at the Gabba, bowled better than any Shield bowler would have ever bowled.
The depth in Indian cricket is far greater than we give credit for.
Says a lot about the maturity of the players in this Indian side.
And as for Tim Payne,
I can't wait to get you to the Gabba, Ash. Tell you what.
it's fair to say he was left to eat his words.